the Blaring Out with Eric Blair Show, and today I'm pleased to have former Black Flag bassist, Emmy Award-winning dialogue editor, and current bassist for the band Dose, Roessler. How you doing, Kira?
I'm doing okay, Eric. How are you?
I'm great. How would you describe your high school years?
Go to school, get good grades, do jazz band, go to practice, go to gigs, go to school. You know, it was that same thing. It was like I didn't, by then, because of punk rock and everything, I was not participating in high school the way other people were. I was going to class, and then I would leave and go to practice. I didn't have relationships in school. There weren't other punk rockers in school anyway. And so I just didn't participate. And that was true in college, too. It was like, I'm not part of this. I'm merely attending classes, and then I leave. You know, I couldn't. I already have a full life. You know, some people go to college for the college experience, and I went to get a degree. You know, not to have the full experience, but to get my degree. So that's what high school was like. It was just in the way of practice. Not in the way, just part of what had to be done.
What was Brendan Mullen's vision for The Mask during your time there?
Vision? I don't think he had a vision. I think he just knew, and he was right, that there was very few, if any, at times, places for this, and he managed to carve out this little place where this little bit of magic could happen. You know, he could be the sort of king of the very small sea, you know, and I don't mean that he had a big ego. He did not, but he was the guy you had to convince to let your band play there, you know, because I tried. I was like, can we play? Here's my cassette of my band, right? You know, so there was that, you know, so he was deciding, and he was putting on shows, and he had, but as to vision, I don't know if eventually he hoped to, I'm guessing if he had any aspirations, it would have been to get out of the basement underneath the Pussycat and get into an actual club type situation. He actually did eventually. Now that I think about it, he was working at a club doing some booking and stuff. After they shut down the Mask, he did the new Mask, and then I think he was working at this kind of almost disco-y like place. He was putting on punk rock shows, but it was, the way the place looked was a little kind of, this is a weird place to do punk rock, you know? So I think, yeah, his aspiration was to create in a way, a safe space where we could do the kind of music we were trying to do. But I don't know what was on his mind.
Was he a kind person?
Brendan was a very kind person, yes. Yes, I think he cared about all of us, especially as sort of young misfits, the runaways, the, you know, poor kind of lost souls. I think he cared a lot.
Who did you bond with the most during your time managing the practice rooms at the Mask?
Oh, I didn't bond with anybody. I mean, again, just doing my homework, letting bands in, then, you know, get my lunch from Brendan, you know. It's funny because it isn't that I didn't have connections. I mean, I was always already friends with Michelle, and I had my bandmates and stuff, but I've always been a little bit antisocial. So, I mean, I can picture myself at gigs sitting on the floor reading a book until the band went on, you know? Like, it's just, I'm not good at bonding. I'm not good at socializing, especially in a group. Much better one-on-one. So, and they were there to practice, you know? So it's like, let them in, get them set up, you know, take their money if they need to. Some of them are monthly rentals, so I don't have to do anything. It's only for the hourly rooms. Do that. So you have some rental gear locked up, open that up, you know, just man the office, basically. Woman the office.
Was there feminism going on, or was it just life happening?
Was there feminism going on? As I said, there were certainly women who I admired because of their strength, because they were creating an image for themselves, and so in that way it was like people like to, talk about it as very misogynistic, and there was an aspect to that, especially as it grew into the Orange County and stuff, that I think there was a misconception, and it skewed more male once it got a little bigger and it got into slam dancing and not pogoing, and stuff. And so I think things got more violent, and it got more male. Does that make it feminine or feminist that the women were strong, that they had a look? I don't know. They weren't running anything. They might have been running some bands. They may have been sort of the voices of some of the bands, but it didn't feel like they were necessarily running the show. There wasn't a lot of show to run, so I don't know. It's a good question. People often ask me things like, well, what's it like being a woman and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know what it's like to be a man in it, so I can't say. But so in that same way, I'd say, well, I didn't feel subjugated because I was a woman per se, but neither did I feel particularly empowered. Now, perhaps those women who knew how to do their makeup felt empowered, but that wasn't me. I personally tend to think of it as a musical movement, if anything, and not a, feminist or, sexual revolution or anything. Some of that, to a certain extent, had happened, and at this point it was, fuck disco, and as hippies and discos, and and there was this sense of urgency to have something else, because arena rock, was all there was, and clubs were doing disco, and there was just no place for us misfits. So it was the musical revolution. It's like, what was Brendan doing? Was giving us misfits a place, and I don't think that's limited to girls or men or women, or it's just limited to, I don't fit with disco, I don't fit with hippie.
Why was Black Flag your favorite band?
It was one gig. It sounds weird, but I had seen them a million times of their various iterations, and then I saw this one gig at the Whiskey. It was a 5-piece with Chuck Biscuits on drums, Des playing guitar, and Henry singing. And I just thought Henry's performance was so sort of bass aggression. He embodied the music so well, and that band with the extra guitar and with Biscuits on drums just, it just hit me. It was probably the mood I was in, who knows. It was just one of those gigs where you're just like, floored at how perfectly this hits me. And like I said, with music, if it makes me feel something strongly, I'm good. It doesn't have to sound a certain way. That just hit me hard. And I was like, okay, they're my favorite band. I'm going to go see whatever they do.
So how long were you in DC3 with ex-Black Flags, Des Cadena, and Jeff Dahl?
Oh gosh, it was probably only a few months. Maybe 6. So, but we were practicing in the same place as Black Flag was, and I thought the 3-piece idea was cool. I had never done it, and the power trio is leaves a lot of room in a way for bass, which is often sort of competing. So I loved the idea, and having just seen Des in my favorite band, I was confident that we could do something cool.
And then is it true you were dating Henry Rollins before you got the gig in Black Flag?
So Henry and I dated for probably 6 months, maybe a little longer, about 82. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long. after I saw that. Yeah, so I was a groupie. I thought they were really cool, and I threw myself at them. No, anyway, yes, we dated, and it was brief, and then we broke up, and then I was in DC3, and then he called me and said, Chuck's getting thrown out. Do you want to jam with Bill and Greg? There won't be anything between us, like that. Just to be clear, And I was like, okay, I got it. Very clear. Nothing between us. So, so as far as I knew, we had this arrangement I would stay on after DC3 practice and jam with Bill and Greg. But when I offered to do that, they didn't seem to know anything about it, which felt a little awkward, but they were up for it. So I stayed and jammed. They had some instrumental type riffs where they would... it was something Greg seemed really into, is sort of like, here's my cool guitar riff, like you play that and you guys do that over and over again while I jam a guitar solo over it. So we had a few of those, and we sort of jammed on these specific riffs, so it wasn't difficult like learning songs or anything like that. It was just like, here's the riff, hold down the fort. And so that's all I had to do, is just hold down the fort. And luckily, really, because if he had caught me at a different time, I wouldn't be able to do it. But I had been playing in a power trio with a pretty good drummer, so I was strong, and I was able to hold down the fort. And then at the end of us jamming, they said, so you want to join Black Flag? Just like that, to my surprise. And I said, well, I'm in college, I have one more year to finish, but I'd be willing to take quarters off or whatever to tour, because I knew from Henry and just from, everyone knew that Black Flag was a touring band, and that there weren't very many, so I just came clean about the fact that I wanted to finish college, but that I was willing to take, time off here and there to make that happen. So they said, okay. And that was that. I said, sorry, Daz, but I have this great idea. You should have Paul be your bass player and have a three-piece, and he'll do the left-hand thing. But Paul couldn't really figure out how to be a bass player because he's not a bass player, so they had to get a bass player. But it was a good idea.
What does dating Henry Rollins look like?
Oh, Henry's really funny. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy his company, and always did. I mean, he's really funny. He, like me, is pretty antisocial, which is weird, right? Because it's like when you have to be the singer in the band, you got people in your face all the time, and I think so people's perception of him as being really hostile and sort of get away from me and stuff, but it's because part of his personality is a little bit, private, and but just in the quiet of your apartment, he's hysterically funny and relaxed and brilliant. And so what it looked like when we were just hanging out was a lot of laughter, and hanging out and, playing some music and a cassette in the other room, and me sometimes studying, him doing whatever he did.
So there was no McDonald's dates or drive-in movies or anything like that?
We didn't go on a lot of dates. I don't remember going to shows together. I certainly went to Black Flag shows as his girlfriend. There were some shows. I think he wore one of my skirts a couple times, like just a plain black skirt a couple times. Like I said, funny guy. So I would go, to something like a Black Flag show, but I don't think we went to a lot of other gigs and dates, restaurants that I can think. I think he did come over to my aunt's house once, like a family gathering. He was my boyfriend. Like he behaved himself and conducted himself like my boyfriend until he went off on tour, a European tour that was really difficult trip, and our relationship didn't really survive the separation. I didn't handle it particularly well, and he did not have a good time over there, and it just was a bad combination of things, and that was that. But it was a lot of fun for a little while.
What's the secret to juggling UCLA during your time with first Twisted Roots and then Black Flag?
Well, at Twisted Roots it was easy because we were not touring, so very different situation. Sure, I mean, there was homework and then, but that I was used to. With Black Flag, it was a whole different matter because we had to somehow figure out a schedule by which we could get our touring in, and we could, and I could get my quarter. Luckily, it was on a quarter system, so 10 weeks here. And then, I'd have... So we started sort of checkerboarding out the schedule, which worked out very poorly, actually, because I ended up taking a winter quarter off, which looked like us having to go on a winter tour, which is not ideal. What you want to do is do a spring and a fall tour, but I had to do there was some rule about some falls and springs I had to be there to keep my status or something. So in 1984, I think, we toured in summer, and I did the fall quarter, and then we toured in winter, which was brutal. I mean, we were in central Canada in the dead of winter. And then I went to spring quarter, and then we toured in 85 for 4 months. So it worked like hell for everyone, and I felt guilty. But I was like just about finishing. They kicked me out right as it was over. I had my last quarter to do, and it was going to be over. But we didn't survive that.
What did you learn about yourself during the time you were basically sleeping on your brother's couch, living in Black Flag drummer Bill Stevenson's van and the Black Flag practice place?
Yeah, those were the sleeping quarters, exactly. I couldn't, look, it's simple. It was simple economics. I couldn't have a place. I wasn't making enough money to have a place. And my arrangement with my dad had to do with me being in school. So as soon as I started taking quarters off, I told my dad he didn't have to support me anymore. Like, I couldn't justify that when I was extending the length of my school. Plus, I leave an apartment empty. It just didn't work. So it didn't teach me that much about myself. I was always about, necessity is the mother of invention. This is what I have to do, and I've made this bed, and I decided to stay here when my mom moved away, so I have to live in this bed, which means I'm going to be broke, which means I'm going to be living in a crash pad with guys. It means, I always been kind of pragmatic that way. And once you make this decision and you choose this fork in the road, then I didn't think a lot about, oh, I wish it was like this, or try to jockey for position. You just... this is what I chose. Being in Black Flag was what I wanted. It was hard, but it was what I wanted. I never regretted choosing that, so it was just a natural extension of the choice I made. I had a community, if you will, of the Black Flag folks, and I had my brother here, and actually my aunt lived here at the time, so I wasn't homeless. I didn't have an apartment. There's a difference. I had options. It was just, that it was just that I didn't have my own space, and as I've gotten older, I realized that matters a lot to me, my own space. And so sure, it added to the difficulty of the situation, especially in times when I needed, quiet time to study, because I was in UCLA studying applied math or something like that, But, we kind of got to where there was a routine. I didn't stay on Paul's couch very much. I would, right after I came back from tour, I would spend some time with him, and then I would generally, after going to UCLA, I'd go down there, and I would, if we didn't start practice right away, I would study at the global booking office is what we called it, or if we practiced, then I would practice for 5 hours and then I would study, it was same thing, right? Go to school, practice, study, still doing it. It's just that I don't have necessarily a quiet space to do it, but that office wasn't bad most of the time. There was people writing back to fans who might have written in. There was business being conducted, so it wasn't party time. It was people resting or people working on projects. So I could study. I didn't try to study in Bill's band, VW van, very often, but occasionally we would go to his dad's house for food. His dad had a very interesting sense of food. He'd do something like a bacon and peanut butter sandwiches or something, and that's probably not the weirdest of it. It's just like he'd put together what he had. Maybe corn on there. It's just like that's what I had in the kitchen. He was a character, and he wanted to help, and we were always starving. The Ginns were trying to help, so we would try to get some support from his dad. But anyway, sometimes went there for sustenance and to rest on occasion. You do what you gotta do, Eric.
Describe a typical day touring with Black Flag.
Driving. Gotta drive. Hopefully not too far, because if you had to drive too far, you don't start in the morning. You start the night before, after the gig. So, depending on how long your drive is, you're driving. You get to the gig, you have to load in the PA system, which was every tour except the first tour I did. We had a full PA system to load in. Then we sound check, and when I say sound check, Greg doesn't like to just do a couple songs and call it good. He likes to actually play, do a little practice, get a chance to do some of those jams he likes to do where we hold down the fort and he plays some guitar solos, So we got to play for an hour or so. And then maybe a little rest, hopefully a little rest, a little food, and then we play the gig for a couple hours. A lot of times we were touring with opening acts who we knew, with Sacred Trust or Meat Puppets or whoever, so we would watch them play, it's try to support them and then play ourselves, and then we have to load out the whole PA system, and again, if we got a long drive, we got to hit the road or go crash on somebody's floor and have the guys fight for showers. And I would try to get to sleep in the van because it was the most privacy. And then I would take a sink bath at the club the next day because staying up for a shower just wasn't worth it.
How would you describe the SST work ethic?
It's funny because I fit so well with that, because I was already that way. I get up and go to school and practice, and and they were already like that. It's like, okay, you play every day, you practice 5 hours to play 2 at the gigs. You answer fan mail. There's always something you record. You record 2 records in 48-hour lockouts. It's everything is kind of everything you do it all the way. When I got my tattoo, I thought, this is a concept I can live with. Because to me, it means whatever you do it all the way. And that's what they, in a sense, reinforced for me, because I had been sort of operating that way, but I had never had a group of people facilitate that by having us all on that wavelength. For a couple years, we were just in sync doing that, And it's unusual, right, to find people who want the same things and are willing to work that hard to get it. It is, however, like being married, like a foursome being married, which means staying on the same page is that much more complicated than a marriage is, because you've got 4 personalities trying to vie for the same wavelength, and so if someone wavers a little, bad things start happening. So there were hiccups, but for a little while there, we were really in sync.
What did you perceive as Black Flag's mission during your time in the band? Was it social, musical, or both?
Yeah, I always thought, and remember, I'm not the driving force behind Black Flag. I had been added on, so I was taking my direction in a sense from Greg, and to a lesser extent Bill, in the way that, you know, I would watch them for to pick up cues. I never saw it so much as a social thing from Greg. He wanted to sort of take his music and shove it down people's throat as hard as he could. You know, and everything we could do to make that happen. And then if we met any resistance, you know, sort of like, then just go, you know, because I'm going to keep pushing, you know. So the social effect of it was that, you know, people who expected Black Flag to sound a certain way or look a certain way or whatever might fall out of the sort of fan base, and so the social effect was that it was not necessarily the same people. You know, you'd get new people, which is what he called the process of weeding out. I think it was, you know, this idea that, you know, if you want me to just keep playing the Damaged record, you know, then go play the Damaged record. You know, I'm pushing forward and, you know, just pushing ahead and get out of the way if you don't want to be pushed against the wall, you know. So I always took it as a musical thing. We were focused on the music sounding a certain way. We carried the PA because we would hit these towns and they would not have what we needed to smash people against the wall, you know, and it was nothing more frustrating than, you know, sounding rinky-dink when people have come and they've paid their money and you know, we want to give them that, and then you get there and some promoter has not done his part, you know. So that was it. That was a response to this idea of we've got to make this happen, and the consequences of that are, you know, we're spending a bunch of money carrying SPAs and we're not making money. Like anybody who thought Black Flag was making a lot of money, between the fact that there was a legal battle that we were still paying for and the PA system, there just wasn't a lot of money being made, which wasn't the goal, so that's fine. You know, the goal wasn't to get rich, obviously. So I always interpret it as a musical thing. Certainly my role was to be the glue, hold down the fort, let him have fun playing guitar.
Walk me through getting the Black Flag tattoo.
Well, that was very shortly after I joined the band. You know, they were my favorite band, and then I was being asked to join, which is a pretty big high. I was on a pretty big high from that, and I think I asked Henry who did his tattoos, because I don't have any other tattoos. And he said, oh, I go to this guy, and he goes, as a matter of fact, I've been thinking about getting one here. And I was like, oh, well, can I go with you? Because I want to get one, you know. So we went together, and I got my first tattoo. And Henry got his here, which I think must have hurt a lot, because he made sounds I hadn't heard from Henry before. And I wish I could give you more detail around it, but it's basically that. It was a, hey, I need this, I want this, take me to your guy. Oh, you're going to go too? Great. That made me feel better about it, and we went. I didn't always have wheels, so it helped to have he didn't either, though. I don't know how we got there. I might have still had a car. There were times I had cars. And so, yeah, we went down to Long Beach, I think, and his guy who did a lot of his work did them the same time.
Illustrate your daily interpersonal relationship with Black Flag founder Greg Ginn during your time in Black Flag.
So Greg is an interesting personality. He's not, a chit-chatty guy. He didn't say a lot to me about what he wanted. His style was to get in practice and sit there literally and go and play the riff and have me together with him until I did it with enough heaviness that I was doing it right. And that I will totally tell you, there were times when I could not tell in what way I wasn't doing it right, which made him feel he had to continue for the next half hour going, so he had this methodology that was obviously established before I showed up. And so that was how he would teach me the songs. And that doesn't mean learning the notes. That means learning how to dig in. A lot of it had to do with how to dig into every note so that each one would be heavier and none would... Because what happens is if you start speeding up, you have a tendency to just get lighter. And so he would not let us play fast until we were playing really heavy. So we'd be going, and then we could start speeding up and see whether that would, we would retain it. And if not, then he would slow back down. So he had this methodology that he was teaching me about how to dig into every single note. And that was probably the way he most often interacted with me, was through his guitar. I mean, there was a casual thing here and there, we would, might smoke a joint together, or, because he was into pot and I was. Nobody else was into anything, but occasionally. And, but we didn't discuss business together, because that was the business side of Black Flag was still Henry and Greg and Chuck to a certain extent. So making decisions about tours, or a lot of this stuff Chuck was still involved. He became the manager. So I was in a sense the hired hand. My role was to play and play well and not break my hand. Stuff like that.
Tell me the story about how you were attacked in the bathroom before a Black Flag performance in Long Beach, California.
So we were actually doing an instrumental gig in Long Beach, I think opening for Flipper, as I recall. And it was before the gig, and I was in the bathroom, and it was weird because in hindsight, I could have sworn I saw the signal, that someone actually signaled her. But this big woman just sort of picked a fight with me, basically said nothing, just started throwing me around like a rag doll. And I just kind of relaxed, because it was like it didn't hurt or anything, until she got me on the ground and she bent my fingers back, which were kind of already screwed up. And then she grabbed my head and started banging it on the bathroom floor, and that hurt, I will admit. So I did resist that a little bit. And I kind of kicked her off me, and I think what happened is some of the other people from the bathroom went and got the guys, because Henry and Bill came and chased after her as she ran out. But of course I had to play, because if you're me, you can't show weakness in this situation. So I still played. The next morning I was really sore in the muscles in the back of my neck from resisting that head thing, but my hand was wasn't that much worse. That was just what kind of gave it away to me, that it was an inside job. Why would you do that if you were beating someone up, right?
How did you mentally and emotionally prevail by playing the show with Black Flag?
You see, the hand thing started the first week I was in Black Flag. I heard this sort of pop I was at practice. I left. I went to UCLA, and they put it in a splint thing, and said, don't play for 6 weeks. And I was like, I can't do that. I just joined Black Flag, and I'm a girl. I can't do that. So very early, I hit this sort of fork in the road that said, sort of physically, this is going to be incredibly far beyond anything I've done, So when that happened in Long Beach, I had already been playing in pain. I had already sort of faced this feeling of, I can't let this, I can't let pain dictate. I can't let people, because we had some dicey situations with people happen too. I can't let people dictate. So it was, and I know I'm describing more of an intellectual thing, but I guess what I'm saying is I had this mindset already that was like, nothing is going to stop me. I can't let this stop me. And I'm sure some of it was insecurity. If I show weakness, these guys will just get a guy. They'll just get someone else. They'll think it's because I'm a girl, And I, although I didn't think of myself as a feminist, the part of that is because I thought women were, in general, weaker. So I didn't want to be perceived as weak. And I had overcome so much, with staying when my mom was leaving, and all of these things about, having to sort of survive without a lot of guidance and support. There just wasn't any question in my mind that I was going to play. Now, emotionally, I was rattled, and I was, I didn't get it, and I was hurt and upset and crying, and why did she do that, and all that was happening, because it just, I didn't understand why someone would do that until later. But again, I've been emotionally backed against the wall many times in my life. So even by then, it was like, just the fact that I'm upset isn't going to decide what I do next. So, I had the sort of emotional wherewithal too to sort of say, I don't need to feel happy or okay. Just like if I'm sick, I played when I was sick. Like, I don't have to be at 100%, so that all that processing had already happened in my life a few times, so there just wasn't a question.
The motivation behind the attack, are you allowed to talk about it?
Sure. Well, I know what was told to me, which is Greg's girlfriend at the time, sister, was the one who, afterwards, I thought I had seen signal to the girl. So I, went on after the gig and everything. I was like, she was there. I swear she signaled. What's going on? And I confronted Greg, and I said, you need to talk to your girlfriend about this, because something's fishy. Something's not right. So he arranged at practice for me to be at practice when she and her sister came, and they of course, like guys, left the room because they didn't want to get involved and left me with these two women. And they basically, what they said was that they did it because I had stolen this guitar, which was untrue, obviously, because I know what it would be like to have your guitar stolen. I've had that. But they were convinced before talking to me that I had stolen this guitar, and therefore that's what they had done. So they admitted that they had done it. I said I hadn't stolen the guitar. And I was pretty much left it at that. I mean, I obviously never really felt very warm and fuzzy towards them, and they did steal some stuff from me on my last LA gig too, I think, but there was just never good vibes. I think it's easy in hindsight to see, well, I was spending a lot of time on the road with her boyfriend. Maybe there was a little weirdness there. I don't know. People are weird.
You are a soldier. I mean, I've heard you say it's like being in Black Flag is like training for the Olympics.
Not actually getting into the Olympics, but training, yeah. Because it was so physical, you know, and I did say that. And look, I'm a survivor, you know, and so however all these years later Black Flag was perceived, or I am perceived, or the way I see my life is this, that I continued to be a bass player. I often say this, I'm a bass player longer than I've been a woman, right? I started at 13. So it's like, that's who I am. And then I try to explain this to people, like, it's like, I'm a bass player. It's one of the fundamental things about me. And nobody can take that away from me. You know, so nothing that happens or nothing that anyone does takes that away from me. Like, people cannot remember that I was in Black Flag or that I am a bass player. I know. And I still do stuff, and I still do music, and I still create. I still play my bass all the time. Like there's no taking this away from me. I don't regret my time in Black Flag, but when you think about it, really, it's 2.5 years out of 58. You know? It's like, it may be what makes me notorious, but it's not that big of a part of who I am. It may be a big part of how other people perceive me. But it's not that much part of how I perceive myself. Like, cause that framed the next thing about me, but then what happened next framed, and so on and so on. And so who I am now is someone else altogether.
Did Greg Ginn ever express verbally an opinion to you about your bass playing?
I mean, he was obviously complimentary when he asked me to join the band. But, and look, no, he's not a big one for compliments. I knew that he was happy for a while with how things sounded. And I think in the end, when they asked me not to play anymore, that it didn't have to do with my bass playing, which was true about a lot of bands I was asked to not come back. He did say something funny to Mike Watt after the fact, though, when he saw Dose, and he told Mike, he said, I never heard her play like that. And I thought, yeah, because you used to tell me exactly like what to play. I never thought I was free to play anything but exactly. So it was in a sense a learning moment. Maybe there was something I missed. Maybe I had more freedom than I knew about, but I didn't think I was welcome to do anything but the very specific bass lines he wanted me to play. Now the next guy played a little more off the lines, but I always thought I was expected to color right inside those lines. So interesting. What's true? You'd have to ask Greg.
What was the mood in the studio during the recording of the Black Flag album Family Man, 1984?
It was Radio Tokyo, wasn't it? I think it was done at Ethan's place. It was an early recording, and a lot of it was the sort of instrumental jamming type stuff that, you know, where again the assignment is you hold down the fort, you know. So me and Bill lay down the bass and drums and then go away, you know, and Greg does guitar and Henry did some vocals on some stuff. But it doesn't, to me, have a huge differential with other recording sessions, except for perhaps where it was, because I don't think we did a lot of recording at that particular location.
What do you think were the highlights of the Slip It In period for you?
It's funny because Slip It In was, in a sense, the first record that was like, okay, this is my time, right? This is my record. And when I first saw the cover of the record, I was like, oh, well, if they feel this way about women, why did they ask me to join? Like there was a moment of, but then, that's easily pushed aside, but it has, it's like, wow, this record has my bass player. It really had my stamp on it. It felt like, and we did 2 records, basic tracks during that session. I can't remember if that was the session we did Minute Flag. We were always trying to do like 2 records, basic tracks in 48 hours, like falling down sometimes to rest. And inevitably I'd have midterms like 2 days later, so I'd be studying at the same time and have a migraine. That's really the one where it's like, it feels like my stamp, it feels like my style. I think that, my hand was hurting, but I felt like I was overcoming the pain and actually able to play the way I was trying to play, and I liked some of the songs, and that was going to be the record we were going to tour on, so it was kind of, my time in Black Flag had arrived. Like, I loved the My War songs, but it wasn't me on the record, so when we would play those songs on tour, then I got to put my stamp on it, but it wasn't me on the record, so I didn't feel like, I couldn't own that, and I could own Slip It In, and I could own Family Man, and from there forward.
There kind of was a benchmark with Loose Nut, 1985, because you collaborated with Henry Rollins for the songs Best One Yet and I'm the One.
Yes.
And Milo from the Descendants did backup vocals, but you may have been studying. I don't know.
So I wasn't there for the backup vocals, it's true. Because we did basic tracks. Again, we do the 48-hour lockout to do the basic tracks, and then I wouldn't necessarily be there for the vocals. The Best One Yet and I'm the One were Sex Sick songs that originally had Michelle's lyrics on them. And what would happen in practice, remember, is we would play for 5 hours. Well, Henry couldn't sing for 5 hours, so he'd oftentimes just be sitting on the ground while we'd be playing, and me and Bill, Greg was probably out of the room for something, and me and Bill started jamming on one of these Sex Sick songs I had, and I don't know how it happened. I certainly never expected Greg to go, okay, well, let's do that, and so he started playing, and Henry wrote lyrics, and to me, those are some of the coolest Black Flag songs. In my head has that too, where it was going to be an instrumental record, and we were just jamming, and Henry was sitting there, and he was writing lyrics, and so it comes more from him to me. He's expressing himself. He's not expressing Greg, sort of party time, woo, slip it in. Mm-hmm. He's expressing, Henry, and when he does that, it just feels more sincere to me, and it's one of the reasons I love the In My Head record, because he got in touch with some stuff and got to put his stamp on that record in a way that he hadn't been doing in the early records.
That In My Head record, I think everybody really shines on that. Like your bass tone, Henry's performance is amazing, and then Greg's performance, like those solos are pretty out there.
Well, Greg's solos are always out there, and I mean that in more than one way. But yes, it is a record that I adore for mainly, like I said, it feels like Henry got to really put his stamp on it. And like I said, it was going to be an instrumental record. He wasn't even going to be on it, and it was only because of his creativity and focus sitting there while we were noodling around over and over again, but saying, it would be cool if I did, he's just sitting there writing. Well, none of us knew that's what he was doing, he's just sitting there going, writing, and the next thing we know, he has a whole fucking set of lyrics to these songs, so I admire him. and ever since has been still creating and changing himself and, you know, making things happen. You know, the people who are still stuck in, you know, punk rock days, 1977 and 80, you know, I have an issue with the rehash thing. I will admit this, you know. It's like, I don't have a problem with them doing music, but do they have to go back and do the music they were doing back then and try to recreate that moment, you know? It's like, I don't know. To me, it's like, move on, do the next thing, keep doing the next thing. That's what Process of Weeding Out was about. That's what we were just talking about. It's like, I don't care if you want to hear what I was doing 25 years ago, 35 years ago. Like, I'm going to move on and do something else. You know, I'm going to do Dose. Nobody likes Dose because it doesn't sound like Black Flag. Oh, well, too bad.
What did you think of the film We Were Feared, and how did you feel about the Germs reforming for that film with Shane West as a singer?
I actually played, there's a point in that movie when they have Black Flag is playing, or like some young people are playing that are supposed to be Black Flag. I played bass with those kids because one of the kids dropped out at the 11th hour, and Pat called me up and he's like, you gotta come in. I'm like, but I haven't been playing like that. And he's like, oh, come on, you know. So anyway, so I did have some involvement, but I don't know that I saw it. I did see them perform, and that was really cool to see. It's so weird to try to recapture things that in my head are so in the moment, you know, but it was still nostalgic and fun. You know, you just have to let go of that hang up that I have about moving on and just jump back in.
Do you think that the process of weeding out actually paved the road for In My Head? Because to me, In My Head is a fully realized Black Flag record.
It is, absolutely. No, the way our practices would work, we would do the instrumental stuff, then we would do singing stuff. Like, we would mix it up. Like, Henry could only sing for like an hour or two, and we would play for like 5, so we would play until Bill and I would drop, and then Greg would keep jamming, you know. So some portion of that time when Henry wasn't singing, we'd be doing instrumental stuff, which is why Family Man happened, and then it's why Process of Weeding Out happened. So we always were mixing up instrumental and singing songs. So to my mind, it's a little more intermeshed. Like, I don't think of this leading, the instrumentals leading to In My Head. It's like we were intermeshing them, and like I said, Henry specifically, when the next instrumental one was going to happen, it was almost like, no. And he didn't, because he would never shove it down Greg's throat, but he did sort of have this, maybe some sort of epiphany, I don't know, but he had this sort of response to these instrumental records by saying, well, what if this, you know, and in so many ways it created, you know, like I said, one of my favorite singing records, because his voice is heard, you know, not Greg's voice, which is a different voice. It's not good or bad, it's just different. Greg's personality is, at least at that time, was a little more light, a little more party, a little more stick it in, you know. Just, and Henry's was not so much that.
What were the highlights for you of the In My Head tour 1985?
It was a long tour. Well, we had the Minutemen. The first, I measure it kind of by which band was it, because we had several. We had the Minutemen for a week, so it was the first time I really spent any time with Mike, and who eventually, you know, we started dating and became my husband. So I got to get to know him a little bit on tour, because you're just so stuck. And then I think DC3 came with Paul, and so we did a version of Twisted Roots, opening for DC3, opening for Black Flag. So we did a sort of a 3-piece, just me, Paul, and I think Des on drums. version of Twisted Roots, which is a lot because I was already doing a 2-hour set with Black Flag, but at the same time, I hadn't played with Paul in a while, and having him out on tour was different. It's so funny because you go through these experiences where, like, my tour experience was totally separate from him, and then suddenly there he was in my thing, he was in my thing, and there was, I would admit, some clashes because he wasn't doing it how I do it, but it was all good. It was kind of cool, and it was a stabilizing force because it just kept going. That tour just kept going. And then Swa came, did the whole rest of the tour with Chuck and Merrill and Greg Cameron, a really solid drummer. And from one tour to the next, it's just like you go to the city, you're in some club that smells like urine, you set up, you do a sound check, you try to rest, you eat some food, it's all so homogenous that there are very few places that, bright lights that stand out. There's not a lot of bad parts that stand out either. There's just this sort of homogeneous experience of grinding it out, day after day. You'd have, like, somebody would make a great meal, you'd have these moments. Mike flew out at one point to meet me in Minneapolis or something to hang out for a couple days, and then he fell asleep on the plane and missed the stop, and I had to come back, and so it was a big mess, so there are stuff like that where there, the little, kind of create creature comfort moments or touchstones, and someone will come up to you way after the fact and go, yeah, I saw you at this and we did that, and I'm like, I don't know, sure, I was there, of course I was there more than once. Which time was that? It's not just bad memory, it's this feeling of I was this infinite loop, so the experience, we recorded the Live 85 record that Who's Got It, the 10.5 up north, and I think that was the day, that was the day when I called home to Mike, who was at the Global Booking, I think, and he said, oh, they're planning this tour. Aren't you in school next quarter? And so I found out I was getting kicked out on tour when I'm about to do the recording for the live record, and I find out I'm gonna not be asked to go on the next. Well, I couldn't. I had committed to finishing my last quarter at school, so which was in a way ended up good because I wasn't blindsided in the face by them. I could just deal with it kind of internally first before I had to. So anyway, I found out, and I played, and we had made a good record, and kept going. And then we played LA, and we couldn't find a gig in LA. We played downtown. We did a power tap, set up our PA, did a power tap until the fire marshals shut us down. And then we played San Diego, which was my last gig, and I knew it was my last gig, so I was a little sad. And then a week later, Chuck was like, "Can we talk?" And Chuck told me. And Greg didn't even tell me face to face. So it's like, those guys don't want to play with you anymore. And I'm like, I know. And he tried to buy me out, and I said no, and said I want to take my amp, and kind of made the logistical arrangements, and that was that. And I then, got to focus on finishing school and getting a job. It's in hindsight, it was that simple. It was like, oh, I guess I'm going to finish school and have to find a job because this bohemian lifestyle is over. Yeah. I think I honestly thought maybe I would get asked to join a band. Nobody ever did, but I honestly thought I might at first. But I was always one for contingency plans. So in my mind, it was, well, I'm going to have to get a place, do my last quarter, etc.
How does that work? Do you own rights in anything? When you wrote those songs, did you have your own publishing company? Were you smart about that?
I didn't mean to exaggerate it, but yes, I mean, there's royalties due for sales, and what he was trying to do was for me to give up my right to the royalties. But see, at that time, I was like, look, if Henry does a movie and becomes a movie star, so that was just the smart thing. It's like anything can happen. Henry could become a movie star. You guys could go do, become big. Just because we're piddly shit now doesn't mean, So it was it's just royalties and stuff that he conceptually would have owed me if he were one to do that sort of thing. Yeah. It felt like they were trying to, we want you to go away, and we don't ever want to have to deal with you again. It felt wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. It was sort of like, you don't have any reason to be, doing that. I knew Bill had, because they had kicked Bill out earlier that year, and I was like, no. So it was just, it just felt like they were trying to pull one over.
The Blaring Out Show.